Hello, I'm Joe Tucker, President of the International Academy of Trial Lawyers, and welcome to the Academy's official podcast, The Rule of Law, The Academy Speaks. Today, I am excited to say we have two former federal court judges with us today. We have Judge Robert Cindrich, who was formerly on the Western District of Pennsylvania's District Court judge, and we have Judge Robert Kugler, who's retired District Court judge from New Jersey. We're going to talk about the judiciary. We're going to talk about the rule of law. We're going to talk about attacks on the judiciary and what happens when the rule of law is undermined. First off, gentlemen, thank you and welcome to the Rule of Law, the Academy Speaks.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
You guys are both part of an organization called Keep Our Republic. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about what Keep Our Republic is?
Keep Our Republic is a 501c3 entity. It was created in the wake of the election debacle that we had in 2020 to try to assure that the next election would be conducted in accordance with the law. That was its primary focus, but its overall focus is the same as ours, the Article 3 coalition. We're a part of Keep Our Republic, just one initiative of what the Keep Our Republic does. We are a growing coalition of currently 54 former U.S. district and circuit judges. And I want to add, we're diverse in all respects. We come from all parts of the country. The judges were appointed for life, that is under Article 3 of the Constitution, which is why we have the name Article 3 coalition, by Presidents Carter, Reagan, Bush, that's H.W. Bush, Clinton, W. Bush, and Obama. The judges are almost evenly divided between those appointed by Republican and those appointed by a Democratic president. Thus, we are and want to remain a diverse and bipartisan group, but our approach really is apolitical and nonpartisan.
That is an impressive group. Did you say 54 former federal court judges?
That's correct. And we have district court judges, of which I was one, and Judge Kugler was one, and we have appellate court judges as well. And so we have a really nice mix. And of course, they're all retired. None of us are active judges. The idea was that an active sitting judge is not in a position to speak out other than through opinions or in the courtroom. We can. We have regained our First Amendment rights after we left the bench. And so we can speak out about what we consider an unprecedented attack against the judiciary of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So we were really created, the Article 3 coalition, to support, preserve, and defend judicial independence and the Constitution and the rule of law.
Well, let's talk about, go ahead, I'm sorry, Judge.
That's why I got involved, is this attack on federal judges. I only retired
exactly where I wanted to go, too.
Okay.
Yeah. Tell us about the concern you have, as well as Keep Our Republic has, about the attacks on your former colleagues, the pizza deliveries we all know about, the killings of family members in some instances. Why don't you tell us how that concerns you, Judge Kugler?
Well, the scope is unprecedented in the history of this nation. I mean, look, federal judges, me, Judge Cindrich, have been subject to threats and criticism our whole careers. But the level now is just unbelievable. I mean, if you look at the statistics that were put out by the United States Marshal Service, whose function is to protect judges and courthouses, you'll see the numbers have at least doubled in the last year. And these are real attacks on judges. These are actual threats against judges' lives. Even more concerning are the threats that are directed at the families of judges. I mean, look, we as judges, it's just part of the job, but we didn't sign up to have our families threatened also. And it is concerning to all of us. It's something I think judges talk about all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. Marshal Service is certainly concerned about it. They're before Congress to get additional appropriations so they can beef up the security that they can provide to judges. But it's something that we, as the branch of government, have never before experienced.
What do you attribute this increase, this significant rise of intimidation tactics and attacks on judges? What do you attribute that to?
Well, I think certainly social media has amplified it, made it easier for people to do it. I mean, things are a lot more politicized than they ever were before. It's the attacks, I think, also from our political leaders. I mean, rogue judges, we're going to declare war on rogue judges. I mean, that's a terrible thing to say from one of our political leaders in Washington. And it just encourages those people out there who may or may not like judges to begin with, may have had some experience in some court that was unsatisfactory. Um, but what we need is the politicians, the political leaders, the members of Congress, the executive branch, to cool the rhetoric and to respect what it is the judges do as equal participants in the governance of this country.
Judge Cindrich, what happens when you have these attacks on the judges? And I am going to echo what Judge Kugler said. When you hear the rhetoric coming from politicians, how do you deal with that and keep our republic? Because we know the only thing a sitting federal court judge can do or say comes through their opinions.
Yes, and that, as you point out, is the reason why we exist. We're trying to, it's a combined message. One is education, educating the public as to what judges do and why they do it. Also, to the practical realities, no judge is afraid to be criticized. We get criticized by the lawyers, we get criticized by appellate courts, and sometimes the Supreme Court. That's the way things should work. You appear before a judge, and the reason you're in there before a judge is, well, you could have a fight, you could have a gun and go and confront the other party to the dispute that you have, or you could go to court. And if you go to court and you don't like what happened there, you can appeal it. And that's the way it should be. But the change here is, for example, threatening impeachment of judges because somebody in Congress doesn't like their opinion. Not that
Is
they
that
committed.
something new? Because it's new to me, and I must confess, I've been doing this for 35 years now. I had not heard of so much. And again, Judge Kugler, as you talked about the rise of social media, I had not really heard about this before. Is this new?
Well, the number, I think there's 10 pending um, in Congress right now. I mean, there have been impeachments of judges in the past. I think there are 8 successful over the history of this country where judges were convicted in the Senate and removed from office, but they were almost all involving criminal acts by the judge. Um, but to impeach someone because you disagree with their opinion is something that is new. I mean, it was tried with a Supreme Court justice way back at the beginning of the founding of the country. And he was not convicted in the Senate. And the grounds for the impeachment was that they didn't like his decisions that he was rendering on the Supreme Court. And that sort of set the precedent that we weren't going to remove judges from office because of their decisions. But that has changed recently. I mean, I think I can remember another case in the 1990s of a judge out in the Midwest who some members of Congress were not happy with some of his decisions and they launched an investigation. But 10 pending currently is just unbelievable and unprecedented. And the Chief Justice has spoken about this a couple of times. That, in the 200 plus years that we've been doing this business, we have never done this before. We have never removed a judge from office because of his or her decision. And that this is not a good thing for our society. So it is very disturbing that we've taken this move towards impeaching judges because of their decisions.
Judge Cindrich, do you think this is actually having a chilling effect in the federal courts? These, you know, the impeachment proceedings, the criticisms from the administration, and the physical threats, do you think that's having sway with your former colleagues?
Um, I'm not sure that it has. We obviously have friends who are still on the bench, and certainly they're concerned. And certainly they have to be concerned when both their own safety and the safety of their family is at stake, and when they could get impeached simply for doing their job. But the bigger threat is not that. Judges are pretty tough people. They got there through a long history of service. But the bigger danger is that the public begins to think that the judges are now going to be kowtowing. So, many of the disputes we resolve in court are disputes between the citizen and the government, whether it's a tax case, an antitrust case, a criminal case, a due process taking case. That's the US government and the citizen. Can the citizen have confidence that the judge will be fair and impartial, not in fear of bucking the administration? So the danger to me is, yes, it's terrible that judges have to feel the way they do, frightened. That's not the real danger. The real danger is undermining the confidence of the general public in fair and impartial treatment in the courts.
Let me slightly
Let's remember. Oh, I'm
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Judge Kugler.
So let's remember that the judiciary does not have an army, does not have a police force. It depends entirely on the public's acceptance of its decisions in order to enforce them. They're not self-enforcing. We can't go out and say, well, this is my decision, you have to do this. We have to rely on the public and the citizens to accept our decisions as legitimate decisions, worthy of being followed, and follow those decisions.
Well, what happens then to the judiciary when you have administration officials, at least in the current administration, saying they're not going to follow decisions they don't like?
Well, I don't think, look, I don't criticize anybody, including the administration, for taking appeals of decisions they don't like. That's their right. That's everyone's right. But to just say that that's illegitimate, that's a rogue judge, that's an illegitimate judge, that's an illegitimate decision, just breaks down the confidence that people have in the court system, in an independent, fair judiciary. I mean, look at the numbers about the Supreme Court and public confidence in the Supreme Court. Look at how they've plummeted over the last years. And that's very disturbing. We need the public. We need the support. We, the judges, we, the judiciary, need the support of the public in order to make this work.
What say you about that, Judge Cindrich?
If you think back to our history, we had a king ruling the colonies, and the king made all judges dependent upon his will and his will alone for their salary, for their tenure in office, for their very existence. So the Constitution recognized this, and we created a different system where we have three co-equal branches of governments, and we have independence of federal judges. To really, what they're doing is, Chief Justice Roberts has put it, is to serve as a counter-majoritarian check on the political branches. The political branches serve their purpose. They are there to continue the dialectic upon which this country was founded, and that's a good and healthy thing. But there has to be a counter-majoritarian check on the political branches when they run amok, and that's what the courts do.
What? Let me then counter that if you feel comfortable talking about this. And Judge Kugler, you were talking about public's perception of the courts. Do you think there have been many people who have criticized the Supreme Court for being overly political? Do you think some of that has been caused by the court and how it has respected itself, that it's brought criticism that it's political?
Well, I think the Supreme Court, particularly the Chief Justice, is very aware of that problem. Do I think they brought it on themselves? Well, they've certainly stepped into some controversial issues. And the way they've done it with what
But Judge
there's
Kugler,
some,
the Supreme Court always deals with controversial issues. That I don't think has been the concern. That's what the Supreme Court is there to deal with controversial issues. We can go back to, Brown v. Board of Education, which was one of the most controversial decisions. But there is a widely held belief that the Supreme Court is purely political now, and it depends whether or not you've been a Republican appointee or a Democratic appointee, that it's now results oriented and
Well,
not. Go ahead. I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
You go.
I'd like to weigh in on that. I think we have to give a certain amount of leeway, grace to the Supreme Court. They're in a hell of a position. You know what flood the zone is politically.
Yeah.
You can flood the zone in the courts too. And so we have this shadow docket. Now, of all those cases that the court has to consider, and consider in light of what we've already discussed, which is the judiciary has no army. Judiciary, the rulings of the judiciary are followed because the Constitution and because they're believed in, not because it has any actual power to force the executive to do anything. So when I say give them a little leeway, if you're going to take on the executive branch in some highly contentious case, it better be one in which there is immense public support, widespread. Don't take on one that's going to be namby-pamby, that people won't know the right from the wrong. Take on one where the people will be clear to come to the support of the judiciary in enforcing that constitutional right. And I think we at least have to give them credit for carefully winnowing the cases to determine exactly which one of those is that case. And we may hear one of those shortly.
You want to comment on that, Judge Kugler?
I think part of the problem has been what Judge Cindrich has referred to as the shadow docket. These things that come quickly to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court intervenes in cases without full briefing on the record before it. And there seem to be an unusual number of those in very hot topics, which leads some people to conclude that it's politics and it's a political court. I don't think it is. I think they're very careful about what they try to do here, but I understand what people are thinking about it.
Let me slightly change gears and talk about civics and the lack of teaching civics in schools. What can we do about that? I posed that question. I just toss it up to whoever wants to answer that first.
Judge
Well,
Kugler,
our organization is very active in trying to get into schools to spread the word about the need for independent judiciary and things of that nature. I know Justice O'Connor was always very active in pressing that, and some of the other retired justices of the Supreme Court. It's an issue. I mean, I remember back when I was in school, in public school, we had civics classes in 7th and 8th grade, and we studied the Constitution in 8th grade and the Constitution of the state of New Jersey in 8th grade. I don't think that that's happening anymore. I think it's a good thing that we teach civics, or at least raise the issue of civics in schools. But that's a change that's going to have to be made through the political branches, I think.
Judge Cindrich, what is the harm that is happening to society from your perspective of the lack of civics classes and the teaching of civics to students?
we're learning a lesson that I thought we already knew, and that is that the Constitution is not a perpetual motion machine, nor is a democracy. A democracy demands the active input of the citizenry. Now, being realistic, not every citizen is going to be highly active in public life or whatever, but it demands, if we expect to keep a democracy, then the people have to want that democracy. They have to participate in it. They have to vote in it. and they have to know what it stands for. That's civics. So I feel very strongly that what you're doing, what we're doing today, what KOR is doing, Keep Our Republic, and the Article 3 Coalition is a part of that teaching mission. We have one of our judges, Judge Taha, who really is deeply into spreading the message among high schoolers and others.
Why don't you talk a little bit more to let people know what you guys are doing to teach civics to our students?
Well, some of it is as simple as going out and going to high school and grade school meetings and talking to the students. Some of it I participate in are town halls. And they were immensely rewarding because, first of all, we tend to get overwrought and we think, well, nobody really cares, just us. And we're wrong. You go to one of those meetings and you'll see angst. You'll see people that are very unhappy with the current state of affairs. But I've really had sessions in which people express that angst, that fear. And I've said, well, why don't we all stand up? And why don't we turn around and look at each other and shake the hand of our neighbor and introduce ourselves? It's amazing how simple things like that work. And then we do talk about the kind of things we're talking about today, about why there's a constitution, the difference between an autocracy, a king, and a democracy. And I think we just need to do more of it as much as we can. And that's one of the reasons why we're so grateful that you're allowing us to participate in your program.
Judge,
We've been very active out there speaking to groups of people. I know Judge Cindrich and I just did a program in New York with an organization of corporate counsel with some of these same issues about the need for the independence of the judiciary. And, we've spoken all over the country to any group that'll have us, to be honest with you, as we want to spread the word out there, how important we think this is to a functioning society and a functioning government.
well, there are many young lawyers that actually listen to this podcast. What can you tell them from your perspective is their obligation and their job?
Well, they take the same oath of office as we did as judges and as we did as lawyers. And that oath in nearly every state includes the pledge to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And that means that every lawyer, no matter if they're an intellectual property lawyer or a personal injuries lawyer or whatever kind of lawyer, corporate lawyer, has that same duty that judges have. And so I remind them of that when we have meetings with lawyers, which we have a lot. We do CLE, continuing legal education.
Are you telling them to go out and do work similar to what you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. And I always tell them, some of you are township solicitors, or you have public forums, and you need to get up and you need to talk in favor of our Constitution. We say we're nonpartisan. Well, I'll tell you, we're highly partisan in one matter, and that is the support and defense of the Constitution of the United States. We're highly partisan. If you want to look at that as what our goal is and our sole goal, our only goal. And we don't care, by the way, about party labels. You can call it anything you want, this party or that party. If they share the goal of supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States, we're for them.
I like to remind these young lawyers when I speak to them, and I try to speak to them often, that they either are now or soon will become the leaders in their communities. They will be the elected officials in the future. And they need to understand how important this is to our society and our government when they take these positions of responsibility in the future.
Tune in next week for part 2 of our conversation with Keep Our Republic, What Democracy Depends On.